Hello and welcome to episode 12 of No Time to Cry. We're your hosts. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Laura.
And this week's episode is expanded on a topic that we covered in our episode about conflicts. We were asked to go into a bit more detail about friendships and probably more so loss of friendship and the grief that it can, it comes over you when you've lost a friend and maybe you've not got closure. We spoke to that a little bit, didn't we, on the last episode about conflict, or a couple of episodes ago even. And there was a few people that's wanted us to just go into that a bit more because it's not spoke about very often.
Yeah, it's a bit of a taboo subject, I think, isn't it? And actually, sometimes the loss of a friendship can be equally, if not more painful than the breakdown of a romantic relationship.
Yeah, I think so, because with, obviously not to just dive straight in, but it's one of those where you have quite and maybe more so for women, I'm not sure, but I definitely have with my friendships, there's quite a strong emotional bond there that I have with most of my friendships, that they do so much for me, probably similar to a romantic relationship without the sex, to put it it bluntly. It's like that would it causes a lot of pain, or has done for me and Laura. Obviously we spoke to that a little bit, but there's definitely other relationships in terms of friendships that were not associated to grief that we've lost that we can talk about a bit more as well. I know both of us have experienced that, so yeah, we just wanted to make sure that this episode maybe dived into it a bit more because there's not many people talking about it. I think I saw a clip maybe some point last year from Perry from Little Mix.
Yeah.
And she was talking about their relationship with Jessie and how
with Fern Cotton.
Yeah, it was with Fern Cotton, and I think a lot of people said, "Oh, I wish more people spoke about this because
it's so common. It's a really frequent
really relatable
thing, isn't it?
as well." I think there's so many of us that have been in that situation, and if you break up with a partner, it feels like there's loads of sort of advice around that, how to deal with an ex, how to move on from a relationship. But most of the time when you have a romantic relationship that comes to an end, there is an opportunity for some form of closure, and not in all cases. Some people get ghosted in relationships as well, but especially long-term relationships, you get that closure, whereas sometimes with long-term friendships you don't, and it's dealing with the questions that are left, I suppose. So yeah, let's delve into it a little bit more. So Laura and I spoke about a particular friendship on our conflicts episode, and again, we're not going to divulge anyone's names or details because we've there's still a lot of respect for that individual, but I think it is fair to probably say that there's still a bit of us that talks about it quite regularly because there was no closure. So we probably can go into that a bit more and just say, well, I don't know, Laura, how do you feel about it in terms of I think we spoke about it a little bit, that there was no real conversation about it.
No, I think how it kind of happened for us was, of course, Shan and I were in a really difficult place in terms of just going through the loss of our parents. And sometimes there are friends that don't intentionally do this, but don't know how to show up in the way that maybe you need them to support you. And it's very difficult when you lose somebody, because all of a sudden the people that you're really close to, you become a lot closer to, but the potentially relationships or friendships where you thought they were super solid aren't. And that's when it starts to show, doesn't it? And I think for us, we were very much there for each other emotionally, giving each other the support we needed, just turning up at each other's houses, going for walks, going for whatever we needed to get each other through. And that particular friend, I just don't think necessarily knew how to support us or how to step in. And I think we kind of got to a point, didn't we, where we stopped reaching out as frequently. And then unfortunately, naturally, the communication kind of just broke down and the relationship just sort of faded. And there wasn't any particular reason as to why it happened in terms of was there a main trigger point or any bad blood.
No.
There was nothing like that. It just sort of
No arguments.
organically
Literally no arguments.
drifted.
There's no bad. I can't look back on any conversation
No.
where there's been cross words or we've fallen out or we've sort of said, I'm not happy with this or I'm not, from either parties. And I think that leaves so many questions because every so often I kind of sit there and I go, should I
Really
just reach
sad.
out to them?
Yeah.
Should I just reach out and have a conversation and kind of say, what happened? Like, was you having a really hard time dealing with it? Or, what caused you to kind of take that space from us? And I suppose start the drift, because I think the initial drift was started by them not communicating our way. And then, I suppose a little bit of maybe resentment from me and Laura going, hold on, we really need you at the moment and you're not turning up, which meant that we were going, well, if you're not going to message me, I've not got the energy to reach out right now. I'm having a really, really hard time. I'm struggling. And we did still reach out, to be fair, quite often. Still trying to spark conversations, still invite them out for food, drinks, whatever it is, check in on them, make sure that they weren't, because when you've been so close to somebody, I think you almost go, oh, they must be having a really hard time as well.
And you can't switch that care off.
No.
It's not like, the emotion and the love and the care that you feel for somebody, even if maybe they aren't there for you at the time when you really need them the most, you can't suddenly not feel those emotions.
Well, like I said, it's
them.
really odd feeling because, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that will relate to this. If that individual called me right now and said, I need you, I'd go.
100%.
And I know you'd do the same.
Yeah.
And it's because that I think that's what's really hard. There's almost like a part of you that's still attached to that person, and maybe over time that will fade. I don't know. We've not spoken to them for over a year. And maybe as it gets further and further and further apart, we'll just get to a point where
it becomes harder, doesn't it?
Yeah, it would be harder for me to go, oh, let me reach back out now, or let me see what's happened. But as it stands at the moment, from my side, I've not necessarily got any anger towards that individual whatsoever, and I don't think you do, Laura. It's
Absolutely
almost
not.
like, I think when you've gone through grief, it just reevaluates a lot of things for you. And you almost think, well, if you've not got the energy during that hardest period that I needed you, maybe our friendship just wasn't what I thought it was, which in that case, I'm going to reevaluate the energy that I put into it. And for me, that meant taking a step back.
Yeah.
And what then happened was just silence.
Yeah.
So that kind of that's where it was left. I think it's just a readjustment of where do I put my energy into, where don't I? And obviously we're being quite specific here because it's important to use real kind of scenarios and settings, and because it has impacted us. But that was on the back of grief. And I know we mentioned it, I think it was on last episode or the episode before. So many people have reached out to us and spoke about that and talk about online, and you see people comment on Instagram posts and stuff like that. And I've had other friends that have lost people where their friends have just disappeared off the face of the earth, because if you're normally like this really happy-go-lucky person and then you change because of your grief, and unfortunately grief does change you as an individual.
Yeah, it does. Massively.
Then they don't want to be around somebody that's not the same person as they knew them before. So
I think that's a really good way of putting it, actually, Shan, because it's not necessarily a case that anyone's a bad person in the situation, but equally you might not be the right people to be friends at that point. And there's that age-old saying, isn't there, about you have friends for a reason or a season, and I think that kind of speaks to that a little bit. And once you've been through a significant loss, it is one of those, it's a bit of a bittersweet situation, isn't it? Because there are people you become way closer to and your friendships become stronger than ever, like, look at ours. But when suddenly everything feels as though, I think when you lose somebody, that's like the most important thing that's going on in your head, isn't it, for some time? And it's not that you're being selfish, it's just that it's all consuming, so it's not
Yeah.
an intentional thing. But equally, like, you've still got the energy in you, I think, to be there for your friends that you really truly love and
Of
care about,
course. Well,
because
look
we
about
were.
we were. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can still do it. And I think that's what's important to say. Like, obviously, Laura and I are maybe being a little bit like hard on ourselves and say, oh, well, we just didn't have that space. If you were to go back through those messages, some would say we were probably still trying too much for how much we were maybe struggling
Yeah.
in terms of trying
Ourselves.
to re-engage that relationship as much as we could. But for us at the time, we, we were talking about it, right? We were like, have you heard from that person? No. Have you? No. Oh, I wonder what's going on. Should we reach out? And I think it was hard because they'd moved out of area as well, which it felt, and they'd been through a hard time maybe the year before, and we'd been there for them, not to do with loss, to do with a different situation, unfortunately, from relationships. So it's not to say that there couldn't have been a lot going on with that person, but I think what we were struggling to get out of them is any information as to what
It's that
was.
openness and
Yeah.
that transparency, isn't it? I think in any friendship, you've got to be comfortable with being vulnerable,
Yeah.
because if you aren't, then you don't really know what's going on. And people can be very emotionally intelligent and can be really in tune with emotions and be very empathetic, but even those people sometimes struggle to know what's going on unless you can divulge some of that information, because sometimes you're sort of at a loss, aren't you, for trying
Yeah.
to figure it out. And then
And that did feel like it, right? It felt like we were trying to almost make maybe excuses for the potential like lack of contact.
mm,
But then when we were reaching out, we weren't being given anything back to explain it. So then that hurt a little bit, because it was a bit like, oh, you've just maybe forgotten about us at the moment, or you've just like kind of said, oh, I don't, that's a bit messy, I don't want to deal with it, which may not have been the case, but it felt like that. It felt like there was no real reasoning behind it, and I was almost searching for wanting to give that person a reason themselves and be like, well, maybe it's this, and they were like, no,
and it's
I'm all
heartbreaking when
right.
there isn't one, isn't there? But
Yeah.
I also think it's one of those things. Sometimes you've got friends who genuinely don't know how to support you when
Yeah.
you're grieving, and that's totally fine. But for your friendship to survive and to get through it, it's
Gotta
kind of like
communicate.
anything. You've got to communicate that you're struggling with it. I've had friends, and I'm sure you've been the same, Sean, where they've said, "Law, look, I love you. I want to be there for you, but I'll be honest, I haven't got a bloody clue
Yeah.
what to say, how to
Same.
help you, what questions to ask. Like, should I offer to do this for you, X, Y, Z, or is it going to upset you?" And you know what? Those relationships and those friendships are so much stronger now, because I said,
Yeah, but you respect the conversation, right? Because I
yeah,
had a friend of mine that reached out and said, I'm so sorry it's taken me a couple of weeks to message you, but it brought up a lot of stuff for me when I lost my parent. And, I couldn't find the words. I
yeah.
couldn't find the words, but I wanted you to know I've not stopped thinking about you. I've been really worried about you. I just needed to. And I have so much respect for that person, because I'm like, I get it, and that's okay. And I've still got a really good friendship with them. And so it's not necessarily the lack of being involved and when it I think it was the lack of maybe empathy towards the situation and acknowledging how we might
It was ignored
feel.
essentially, or
Yeah.
that's how it felt. And even though, again, like we said, it's not intentional, I think when you avoid certain situations like this, they're not going to go away. That's
No.
the truth. I mean, once you've lost somebody, even now, Shannon and I have spoken about it in previous episodes. There are still days now that are some of our worst.
Yeah.
And that's just grief. It's an ever long, lifelong journey. It doesn't just disappear. I think some people think it does,
Yeah,
don't
well, I
they?
always think about
But
my grandma, because my grandma, unfortunately, is like, she'll hate me calling her grandma. Sorry, Nan. I always call her Nan. She'll be like, I'm not grandma. She's lost so many people in her life: her mum, her dad, her partner, friends, her children's dad, like so many people. I feel like my Nan holds so much grief towards all of those, even if it's 10 years or 5 years or whatever it is. It ripples through her, because there's so much love for those that she spent so much time in, and for some of them it's been 10 years and she still deeply feels it. And I think that, to me, is the epitome of everybody goes through grief, but it does, and loss, and throughout your life, it doesn't make it easier as the ones come along. It's everybody's got their own experience about it, and I believe that from a friendship perspective, that individual in particular, maybe more so towards my situation, thought I would handle it very differently to how I did.
Yeah, I'd probably say that's fair, yeah.
And I think maybe they struggled to maneuver around the fact that I wasn't acting how they anticipated me to act, and because I'm not normally someone that's really emotional, or I am, but not so. I kind of can carry a lot before it breaks me.
You're very resilient. I think that's probably the right word.
Probably the right word for it. Thanks, Law. Resilient over here.
Linguistics student.
Yeah. We always knew there was going to be a balance between me and Laura on this podcast, between someone who can barely string a sentence together and then someone who's literally qualified to do it. But yeah, I don't know if it felt like the turning point with their relationship, obviously when you were going through your grief, to then a few months later when I lost my dad, was just maybe the change in dynamics of our friendship group.
And it must have been a lot. I think that's the other thing I think to bear in mind for this person. It's that, all of a sudden 2 of the people that she was closest to had suddenly gone through very significant losses of parents.
How overwhelming, right?
Yeah, and that's a really difficult place to be in as a friend. You've got to carry a lot of additional stress and emotional sort of support in that situation. And you know what? Not everybody wants to do it, but also not everybody is in a position, I guess, where they have the capacity to give it. So that's okay as well. I think, you've got to be in a situation, like Shan said, to evaluate your friendships to a point and to understand, maybe they're going through this or maybe they're going through that, and you make allowances, don't you? And you can be really understanding even if you're going through the hardest time in your life.
Listen, like I say, for me, there is no door closed. If that individual hears this episode, let's just say that, who knows, right? They might do. If you feel like too much time has passed and now it feels awkward, my door is always open. Send a message. Have a conversation. Agreed. There's no bad blood about it. But it feels, I feel like this is really personal for me and Laura. We're kind of going a bit deep about it. But, speaking about a very specific situation.
You don't get to chat it through though, do you?
It doesn't. And it feels like if this has happened to me and you, it must have happened to other people.
Yeah.
And it's really awkward because it's almost like we've really struggled to manage it. And listen, we've not spoke to that person for a year on. I'm sure you can hear in our voice, it's still something that we struggle with a little bit. And it's something that we have spoke about many a time. And I think what is awkward sometimes, and this is relevant, right, is sometimes the people around you that love me and Laura or love you will find it very difficult to watch somebody who they've seen you pour into not pour back. And I think you have to park some of those opinions and deal with how you would, because sometimes people are angry on your behalf.
Oh, you are definitely for me, big time.
Yeah, all the time. We'll talk about a different scenario outside of grief that I had to kind of just try and reel myself back in from what happened with you. But I'm very protective of my friends, and some of my friends are very protective of me, as of our partners. And I was speaking to my therapist about it because I really struggled with this situation with this friend, and it's something that has come up in therapy for me because I've had to kind of grieve it. Like we said, I've had to grieve the friendship, and maybe I'm not quite over it yet.
And you can't be, because again, until you get answers, which you might never get.
There's no closure. And some would say to me and Laura, why don't you just reach out to that individual? I think we were the last person to reach out, so it's almost like that needs to come from
There's
them.
only so many times you can try. I think, everyone, if you really value a friendship, I'm 100% a firm believer that you've got to make a few attempts to try and understand, like, is it salvageable? Are they going through something that maybe you don't really know about? And you've still got to be...
Maybe they just don't like us anymore, you know?
And that's okay too. You've got to have that, but you've got to have that kindness, haven't you? You've got to have that sort of understanding that the world doesn't revolve just around that one person, and sometimes you might be going through a hard time, but you need to appreciate a lot of people are. And I've always
Yeah,
said that. I know people sometimes say to me, "Oh, but Law, you're the one that slashed your mum," and I'm like, "Yeah, I
I
know,
know,
but
but
it doesn't mean that any other scenario that might be really difficult for
yeah,
somebody
it doesn't
isn't."
invalidate other people's stressful life. It's like I said
No,
not last week, the week before. When people say, "Oh, you've got an amazing life, you've got this," it doesn't invalidate that you can't feel
you can
some
still be
form
sad
of
and be
sadness or pain,
depressed,
exactly,
or
or suffer with depression or whatever it is.
mm,
So it's really hard. And I remember speaking to my therapist about it and saying, obviously there's some um people in my life that would love me to say that if somebody reached out that maybe wasn't there for me, that I would go, no, see yourself out the door. You didn't turn up for me when
shut
i
off.
when i needed you. But it's just not in my nature. It's not in my nature. And
You'd have respect for it as well. I think
yeah,
if because it takes a lot
after
of
all
guts.
this
That
time, yeah, yeah, of course I would.
there's a lot of courage in doing that after a
Yeah, and
certain
I
amount of
think
time's
if you put yourself in that situation, where maybe I'm sure they think about it regularly as well. Like, oh gosh, it's a bit of an awkward situation. We've never really spoke about it. And there'll be people that will ask that person about us, and they'll be like, oh, I've not really spoke to, and I'm sure it's like then, oh, I don't maybe want to think about it, or I don't want to think about how it got to that point, or maybe maybe they know why that happened, and they're happy with that, and they're happy with the situation that it is. We don't know. And I think that's the kind of most important point, is like, we just don't know, and that's what's hard to
I think
deal with.
a lot of people that have been through this sort of like the sudden, not even a breakdown of a friendship, because like we said, occasionally,
No.
and well, actually quite often, friendships can just sort of almost like disintegrate a
Yeah.
little bit
And
because it's the time,
sometimes
isn't it?
sometimes you fall out, right?
Well, that's the other side
and
of it,
and
yeah.
that's the other side of it. But it doesn't mean you don't grieve it, because I think there's, I've not really fallen out with anybody as an adult, but definitely when I was a
No.
teenager, and you kind of have those more like volatile relationships and friendships. Sometimes there's like a big argument, and why the distance is there, and maybe sometimes you can rekindle it. I know there's a couple of people that I was maybe really close to in school, and then we had a big argument about something silly, or it could have been about like a birthday or something like that. And then as we've got older, we've reconnected on social media, and every so often we'll message
And you
each
grow
other.
and you
And
change, don't you?
yeah,
Like,
and
I think,
and sometimes it's a natural kind of gap, and everybody's happy with the fact that it's distance in itself. I think sometimes as you get older, you have your friends that maybe you used to go out with all the time, and then you stop partying as much, and then you go, okay, well, maybe we don't have that much in common past maybe going for drinks. And
good time friends.
yeah, good time friends.
Mm.
And as everybody grows up, you kind of distance, and everyone goes, yeah, well, it's probably a good thing actually if we don't spend as much time together, because I don't think we have as much in common. Or maybe you've tried to spend time with each other outside of that scenario, and just realize that the relationship's just not, that's not what the friendship
And that
is.
happens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because especially with friendships that you have in your former years, like when you're, a teenager, you're still learning who you are as a person. You're still trying to figure out what you want to do with your life. You're trying to
Mm.
navigate things that are all new to you. And I think it's the same with your friends, isn't it? Like you'll be friends with people that at the time have similar interests, have commonalities. And then as you get older, things change, whether
Yeah.
that's like your career's different, how your values are different,
Yeah.
you want kids, they don't. There's all those sorts of things that play into it,
Yeah.
aren't there?
And
So,
sometimes you come apart and then you come back together. Like one of my best friends, from like baby, like childhood, there was definitely a period of maybe 2 or 3 years when I was moved up north, and I was transitioning my life slightly in terms of working and my relationship with Jamie and buying a house. And they were quite far away for that. They were still wanting to go out every weekend and those sort of things, or were spending time with people that maybe I'd outgrown in terms of like our friendships. They're not people that I chose to continue to have friendships with after school. And it's not that we ever, like, we wasn't speaking as regularly. It would go months rather than weeks or days or whatever it is. And then as that person has then moved on to that next stage in their life, we've got loads back in common, and they're one of my best friends again, and we kind of reconnected. Not that we ever completely disconnected, we just had a bit of
A bit of
space
distance.
a bit of distance where I think we just didn't have as much in common at that time. So I think they would probably agree that when we were talking, it always used to reflect back to talking about people from school or talking about old friends, because we didn't have enough in common in our current life to discuss and bounce off each other with. So then there's only so much you can talk about, people that you used to go to school with and what they're doing now.
Yeah.
And it just becomes a bit sort of monotonous and a bit like, oh God, we're talking about the same thing.
It's going to stagnate at some point, isn't it? Because there's only so much you can say, but
yeah, but
that's so common as well, isn't it?
And it's just growth, and I think people have them in relationships. You have times in your relationship where you're closer than ever, and then you have times where maybe everyone's busy at work and you're trying to make sure that you keep connected, and then you go again, it's like this, right? And if any relationship is completely plain sailing, there's
something wrong.
Something wrong, Like there's got to be those, because life is up and down. So how can your friendships, your relationships not be?
They become the strongest relationships and friendships, don't they? So I think when you go through
kind of power through,
turbulent times and all that kind of stuff, and like they say, for better or for worse, and you get married, it's the same with friendships. Like the strongest marriages, friendships I know have been through some sort of like difficulties or challenges, and sometimes friendships hit a challenge and you're unable to overcome them together. And that's when, like we've said before, potentially friendships break down, but I think, or relationships. But I would always say, even though it's really heartbreaking sometimes, if you make a decision that you decide, do you know what, I don't want to be friends with somebody anymore. So say if it's like an actual sort of, it's a conscious decision, you're very much like making an intentional decision to cut somebody out of your life, you are absolutely valid to do that. Whatever you think is best for you, if it's right for you, then I do think you've got to do what's right. However, I do think it's very sad if somebody on the receiving end genuinely hasn't necessarily done anything wrong, or maybe they have and they don't know what they did. I've heard people say before, you don't owe anybody anything, but I think that's just very cruel.
Yeah, because I think if we listen, Laura, I don't know how much you want to go into it, but obviously there was friendships before grief that I got particularly angry over in your world, because I think as another friend, sometimes you can see somebody not being treated very well by other friendship groups. And I'm a very honest person, maybe sometimes too honest, but I think I had said to you ahead of a time, they're not your friends.
And a few people actually said that.
And you can pick up on it. You can sort of see when somebody is giving into a friendship, getting very little back. And when you care about somebody, it's like being in a relationship with them. I care about you so much. The hint of somebody taking advantage or not treating you in a way that I think is deserving, and that's not me having too high of opinion of Laura. She's an angel. Like, she's nice to everybody that she meets. She gives her to every relationship that she has. And sometimes people take advantage of that. And in that particular scenario, it was very difficult. But again, I'm someone that's honest, but I will always leave you to make your own decisions. So if I've picked up on something, I will say to you, listen, I've seen this, this and this. It's not just been a one-off. There's been a number of occasions where I feel like you're not being treated very fairly in this friendship group that you're in. Just a heads up, have you noticed it? Like, is it something you're conscious of? And I think at the time you kind of were, but maybe not.
Yeah, there was 3 of us as I was growing up. And I think when you're younger, you have all sorts of different friendship groups, don't you? Your circle definitely becomes smaller and stronger as you get older, which I'm really grateful for. I feel like now I've got the most incredible circle of friends, and I'm so thankful every day for them. Obviously, Shan is very much included in that. No, she's not.
Bloody hope so. What am I doing sat here?
Yeah, I was part of a friendship group from when I was really young. And I had a bit of a hard time when I was younger, just feeling a bit like insecure and just not feeling like, I don't know. Like you said, I was very much I got walked all over a little bit at
Mm.
times. And I'd been friends with a particular girl for years and years and years, and we were very different. Like anybody that met us, and saw we were friends often commented on it.
Yeah, like it's
At least
odd
from my
friendship.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd often say to me, "Oh, well, no judgment, but I just wouldn't think you'd be sort of in that sort of circle." Um and we were friends for a really long time, but I'd say it was more of the good times like we mentioned
Yeah.
before. And I tried my best to always be there for her throughout all of the difficult times that she did go through in her life. And then I went through some pretty tricky stuff personally, and they weren't there, but that wasn't the end of the friendship. I just sort of thought, oh, it's
Mm.
okay, maybe they didn't feel comfortable supporting me, or they didn't know what to say, or whatever that was. So I kind of just let that slide.
Yeah.
And then a couple of other things happened where there was a big celebration for me. I won't go into like the specifics of what it was, but it was something that was meant to sort of be more about me, and I
Yeah.
find that really difficult.
Yeah.
In general anyway. But I think they kind of made they tried their best to make it not about me.
Yeah.
Is
Quite literally.
yeah. And again, I didn't know about this, and there was other girls there, my really close friends, who like all of them said behind closed doors, bless them, and not to me, like, what is going on with this girl? Why is
Well,
she?
we actually messaged them.
Yeah,
We messaged them at the time and just said, "You're taking the piss. Like, what's going on? You're supposed to be one of Laura's longest.
yeah,
Like, you pair are supposed to be her longest friends. Some of us haven't known Laura as long as you, and this behaviour is not really acceptable." And the response was not great. But again, that wasn't the end of your friendship.
no, I kind of again, and the other girls that were there were so incredible, and I'm still really close to all of them today, and I'm so thankful for that they didn't ruin the time for me. But yeah, I didn't know about it, and I soon found out, and I was like, "Whoa, what's that about?" And fast forward, a number of things kept happening, and I'm a bit different now. I think I'm a little bit more. I'll stand up for myself, but I wasn't then.
Mm,
I always give everybody
mm,
101 reasons why they've done something, and actually,
mm.
Shannon's like, no, sometimes Laura, people just aren't.
Yeah, sometimes people are
A
pricks.
bit, yeah, yeah. And I'm always like, no, they're not. And she's like, no, Laura, just stop. Like that is, yeah, it's prickish behaviour, basically. But yeah, fast forward a little bit into the future, and I was due to meet this particular friend, and she'd recently been to my wedding party and stuff, so all really
Yeah.
good terms, no issues. I was due to meet her. I actually had just got a puppy, and most people that have had puppies or know anything about dogs know you can't take them out
No.
for a certain number of weeks. So I said to them, to these two particular friends, hey girls, I'd love to see you, but actually it's going to be tricky for me because I can't leave Malcolm. So I'd love to host you here at my house, and we can
Yeah.
have a Chinese and get some fizz, or otherwise you girls go and enjoy yourselves and I will join another time. It was just a bit of a casual get together. It wasn't
Mhm.
anything like sort of major. And I never heard from that person ever again.
Yeah, it was just a lack of response. But
Yeah,
what I think is important to reflect on is actually that you really couldn't deal with that.
I couldn't. No, I was young, and I think
Yeah.
I was absolutely genuinely heartbroken.
Well, it felt like a
I was
rejection, I think. I
heartbroken.
think there was a lot of like, probably how people feel when maybe they have been ghosted in a relationship or something like that. There was a real, I read through every single message that went between you and that people on the lead up, what you sent over, and there was just no excuse for the behavior in
I
terms
was
of
even
not
told by the other
responding.
girl, "You've done nothing wrong."
Yeah.
So I was like,
Well, why am I
well,
being
why?
not
What?
being responded to?
Yeah, and that's what was. Do you know what? That's what was harder for me, because I'm the type of person where if I've done something wrong,
You'll take accountability.
Yeah, and I will absolutely hold my hands up, and I even said to them, I'm mortified. If I've done something wrong, I'm really sorry. Please let me put it right.
Yeah.
But I genuinely was racking my brain, and I couldn't think about what had happened between
No.
that really short space of time.
Yeah. But Laura was like that person, you know, when someone gets split up with and they've got like
It was awful.
no idea. Like we'd be out on a night out, she'd have a few drinks and she'd be like, I'm going to text them.
Yeah,
I'm going to text them. I need to know what's going on. And I was like, Laura, give me your phone.
I was genuinely
now.
heartbroken. And like I said, been going through a bit of a hard time anyway. So my mental health was pretty much on the floor at the time. And then that kind of happened. And I just thought, what have I done? Like how can I be friends with somebody for that many years and for them to just suddenly decide to just never respond to me again? And I always said to Shan, look, if they've decided they don't want to be friends with me anymore, if they've outgrown me or whatever it is, that's totally fine. It was more just a case of I beat myself up so badly that I thought I was a terrible person. Like, and like I say, the other friend that was the mutual friend between the three of us actually said to me, "You've genuinely not done anything." So, but I said that makes it worse.
Yeah, that makes it worse. So what's happened?
Yeah,
like I think even to this day, you've never really
still don't know,
and you just have had to come to terms with it. But it's one of those things, you know, on the nights where you can't sleep. And you sometimes it just pops
it was.
into
Do you know
your
what?
head.
It was COVID nights as well. So you know what it was like then. You had too much time to think, didn't you? And I couldn't even go and see it,
wasn't it? Yeah.
Because people had said to me, "Well, did you not like think, you know, maybe you should just pop over?" I couldn't really.
No, but I remember that individual had a child, right? And you still sent them a present. And I was like, Laura, please. I think we need to just after the present, let's just back off a little bit because.
But that's how I am.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? Again, if she'd have said to me, "Do you know what? Do one. I don't want to be your friend anymore." I would have really still been upset about it, but I would have accepted it. But I was like, something's happened to her. Maybe something, and nothing had, thank God, you know. There's no bad blood from my side. It's like, you know, she wasn't, now I'll reflect back, like you said, she wasn't a very good friend to me at all, you know, over the years. But did I care and love her deeply? Yeah, because that's how I am as a person. That's how I am as a friend. Like I will pour everything into the people that I love and care about. Sometimes to people that don't probably care about me as much as I care about them, like in that situation. But that's why I was saying before that yes, you don't owe anyone anything, and I've heard people say that before, you know, if you cut someone off, you don't owe anyone anything. And yeah, and I agree with that to a point, but I do still think if it's a situation like that where the person genuinely has no idea and wants to try and salvage what you've got, I do think there is a little bit of decency there that should be.
I think personally, I don't think I would ever cut anybody off without giving any form of notice of it.
Because they need to be able to work on it. If they have hurt you as well, you know, which does happen.
You have a right to say.
Yeah. And if you've said, look, that enough was enough, like, that was too hurtful, whatever, then absolutely fair enough. But they need to know, because otherwise, how are they going to know?
But then I suppose you could say almost what happened with the other friendship. Maybe we haven't voiced, but I don't think at the time I was as hurt about it. It was more confusion.
Yeah,
around.
Sort of like,
so there was
why?
nothing really to voice, and I don't think I have cut that person off. You know, like I say, if they, and the same from your side, like if they reached out to either of us, we'd speak to them, right?
Even probably the same with that other friend I just spoke about. If she was to reach out to me tomorrow and say, "Hey, Laura, like, I'd love to see you for a coffee," I mean, there's plenty of people who probably say to me, "Don't."
Please.
But I'd probably say, "Yeah, I'll hear you out."
I think sometimes I think the way that me and you live our lives and why we probably get on so well is I do believe that everybody should have a chance to at least explain themselves.
Yeah.
So I might decide after they've explained themselves, actually, that's not a good enough reason for how I was treated.
No, yeah.
But I would at least hear it out. And, you know, maybe we're very forgiving people, but I do think sometimes life is a very complex thing. And there may well be reasons that would justify, and then it's got awkward or whatever it is, or, you know, we've not tried in a long time now, and maybe they were expecting that we would, or who knows? I don't know. But I think if you're going through a situation and maybe you've not lost somebody, like, as in they've died, you've just lost a relationship.
That is grief, though, isn't it?
It is, because there's a lot of similar feelings. I think me and Laura can reflect and say, you know, with a parent, there's a lot of other stuff tied into it. But the the basic emotions in what you feel when you lose a friendship or someone close to you is very similar to the types of emotions you feel when you lose them to death.
Because you
And
do lose them. They might still
yeah,
be living, but, like, that particular friend I've not spoken to for years,
no.
and yet, she was a part of my life for a very, very long time, and then all of a sudden that just disappears, and in some ways, I think it can be harder to wrap your head around.
Yeah, because I think if you're similar to us, you're looking for some sort of self blame to
Yeah.
give it reason. You're going, did I do this? Like, with that our other friend, there was a lot of me. I know at the time when my dad passed away, there was a couple of things that was said or done by them, which I kind of made a few excuses for in terms of behavior. And I was like, well, no, because they're not a bad person. They wouldn't have said that, meaning that. So I didn't take it to heart, or they wouldn't have meant it like that. So I didn't put anything onto it. And then it's sort of like you want them to embody everything you thought they were or would be for you, or would do for you. And I think it's quite
It's really hard to accept that.
yeah, and it's hard, it's confusing because there's still so much sort of tied there, and you'd like to be able to think at some point. But listen, I think you also have to be prepared to say and have a little bit of self-respect for yourself.
You never lose that as well. Like, that's the other thing I'd say is that the two scenarios can coexist as well, can't they?
Yeah.
Like, it's not a case of if a relationship or a friendship does sort of break down, the good memories you had are always going to be
Yeah, we still
there.
talk about the stuff like that we did together as a group, and we don't go, oh, we're not talking. It's not like
No,
Voldemort. You
but
can't say that person's name.
but you do have to be like, I've read into this a lot recently. I think it's great. It's a theory called the let them theory,
Mm,
where if someone's going to do something and be a certain way or respond a certain way, let them. Like,
yeah.
that's how they're going to do it. That's
Well, I remember I had a conversation with my sister, and I think I mentioned on another episode. Recently she's lost her dad, and she was going through a bit of a difficult time with a friend during that period. And I said to her, you have to let them show you what kind of friend they are to you.
100%.
You have to either give them the opportunity to be there and realize that they've maybe not been there for you the way, and then they'll go, crap, I should have done this, I'm really sorry, especially if you vocalized it, or they won't do that.
But give them
And
the opportunity if you
yeah,
can, again, like we say,
100%.
within reason. If something really drastic and awful has
Yeah,
happened,
you got to draw a
that's
line under it.
that's different. But in that scenario, some people genuinely are just
Yeah, and I
unaware.
think actually for that particular friendship, it has kind of worked itself back out. But I had a conversation with her, and I just said, like, you've never been in this scenario before. It might be the case that that friend is not going to turn up for you, or have the conversation and see if they do. Because once you've vocalized it, then you can say,
It's going to go one way or the
it's going to
other.
go one way or the other. And luckily it
Yeah.
went the positive direction, but she was prepared for the fact that it wasn't. But I think that's only because, oh my god, my belly's rumbling, guys, I must be starving. um Only because I had experienced it and vocalized that to her, that she was kind of prepared. Because otherwise, how lonely, especially if you're going through grief. Like, I'm very lucky to have other people around me, but if that had been my only friend,
And some people are
my
in that situation, and
yeah,
that is hard.
I
That's
would have felt
heartbreaking.
very, very lonely at that time, because if I was single and that was my main friendship and I didn't really have other friendship groups around me, I think I would have ended up in a very, very
It's
dark,
like a double whammy,
yeah, a
isn't it?
dark place, because I would have felt like I was dealing with it, all the grief on my own, whilst grieving another person who I thought was going to be there for me and wasn't.
Mm.
And then I've got no one to talk to and no one to voice this pain that I'm feeling to. And sometimes that person, you are talking to them, but they just can't get it. And it makes you feel lonely. And I think loneliness is something that you can feel in any relationship
There's make or
loss.
break situations, aren't there? There's certain things I think you think, you know what, I can overcome that. Or there will be certain scenarios when maybe a friend or somebody you love responds and you think, do you know what,
I said you got to have some self-respect sometime and
yeah.
go, do you know what? I'm more deserving than what this is.
And that's when you do have to make a decision, I guess, consciously, probably for the best situation and outcome for both of you, to step back. Because if
yeah.
you are in very different places, then ultimately the end result of that is inevitably not going to be a great one, really,
Yeah.
because you do suddenly sort of lose that
Mm.
same way of
Anyway,
thinking. But
guys, if like we say, if any of these people are listening,
it's dead
no
common
hard
though.
feelings.
It is though, isn't it? And
Yeah.
and we still care about you. It's not a case of we've been lucky in the respect of the friends that the breakdowns of friendships we've had, there wasn't any malice. Like
No.
that stuff like that does happen, and we totally get it. And it's so common. Like we've said, the amount of messages we had to say, please, can you do one on friendships? Because I've been ghosted, and there was a friend I had for years who I don't speak to anymore. I don't know why. It's so
Yeah. Well,
scarily
obviously,
common.
and on the back of conflict, sometimes it's because people have said some really horrific things, and then
Yeah,
you're dealing
that's
with
different
the
as
grief
well.
of kind of stepping it back and going, "Wow, you were not the person I thought you was," and then almost second guessing your own thought process and
Like, who was
saying,
that
"Who was
person?
that person, and how was I fooled for so long?"
Mm.
There's a lot of, again, you can have that in grief. I think relationships are so complex, and people talk about, we said before, people talk about romantic relationships all the time, but friendships are really complex. And actually, in some cases, for some people, their friendships are closer than maybe their relationship,
You might not be in a relationship.
that's it. You
Is
might
the
be
other
single, you
thing.
might be
So
living for your friends and spending time. And I think, yeah, it's really hard, and it can be quite traumatic, and it can shape you as a person, specifically if there has been some more malicious situations that you're
it's got to
trying
be
to
healthy, hasn't it?
overcome.
You've got to get to a point, especially in adult life. I think you do get to a point where your circle just becomes smaller for good reasons. And actually, one of the things my mum always used to say to me was, when you die, if you can count 5 really, really genuine good friends on your hand, you have lived a very good life. I
I'm
think
just
that's
also
so
going to put
true.
it out there that Helen loved me, so,
She did.
you know,
She did.
if your mum likes your friends,
It's a good sign.
it's a good
And
sign.
she had some very good instincts and intuition on people. And I think I've weirdly got it for the most part. For other people, but not for myself, haven't I?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because you will also say
Ugh.
things to me where you will say to me,
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
quite good at that, right? I think and that's because me and Laura have built a real base of
You're blind
communication
to it
in our
yourself, though, aren't
friendship.
you? I
Yeah, but you've got
think
to
is
have
the other
friends that
thing.
will tell you about it. Because
Yeah.
if you're caring individuals, and we give a lot more, we give. I am more likely to say to Laura, that's bang out of order. You shouldn't let them do that to you. But if I was the person it was happening to, I'd be like, oh, well, maybe it's this. I'll give them a chance to recuperate or not. But I probably am a little bit more cutthroat than Laura, in the chance where I'd maybe say something earlier on and be like, oh, what did you mean by that?
Yeah, you
Because
would.
I'm not sure I like your tone, or I'm not sure I
It's a
like
good
the way
job
that
I've got you, really, though. Otherwise, I'd.
And I'm quite a protective friend as well, so I will call it out. But I think I've got quite good especially with the friendships that I have now. The communication is there, so it's
key.
it's
That's
key,
key.
and that's to any relationship. If you're not communicating in your relationships, they're gonna fall apart at some point, because if you can't vocalize how you're feeling, whether that be good or bad, you're not going to be able to build a strong base to your friendships, your relationships, your family life. If you can't communicate amongst you, at some point it will implode. And I actually caveat with that, I think it's really important to communicate when your friend is absolutely turning up for you, and just giving thanks and
Goes both
saying,
ways.
yeah, and
Definitely.
just making sure that you show them how loved they are, how appreciated they are.
A bit of recognition goes a really
Yeah,
long way,
recognition
doesn't
long
it?
way. And I just think for our friendship group that we have now, there is a lot of gift giving that we do. And that's mostly to do with appreciation, because it's like, it's just that even if it's a meal, it might not be a gift. It might just, well, let me get this. Like,
Or we'll just spot things that we know each
yeah,
other likes.
exactly. And it's almost like thank you for everything you've done for me. I know you're not going to want it, but I've seen this for you, and this is my way of saying thank you. But we also vocalize very often how much we appreciate each other. We don't have those kind of and listen, I do have friendships like that, but they tend to not be the ones that I'm as deeply connected to. We will joke with each other, but we never ever bat each other down.
No.
Even as a joke, I would never ever say anything to you that would be harsh, would be hard hitting, and then go, oh, I'm only joking, like this, that, and the other. That's just not what our friendships
And I
are
don't think
built
that is
on.
real friendship either. I think when people do
They're
make
not
sort
my
of
style of
those
friendships.
No, I think that if people sort of give you sort of backhanded compliments or make underhand sort of comments, then there's normally something in that, I think.
Yeah, and we've just never done that, you know. And
Because
you've
we're true
seen,
friends.
yeah, and you've seen me and Laura. We will laugh and joke and make like light of situations together and take the piss and do funny voices and be very playful together. But
But we'll say when we feel like each other needs to.
yeah, but also I just don't think I've ever. We were talking the other day. I don't think you've ever said something to me that's upset me, even if it's been like a Shannon, you need to stop doing that, or you need to stop this person doing, and maybe it's not something I necessarily wanted to hear, or it could vice versa. I have never come away from that going, oh, I can't believe she said that to me, or whatever.
No.
And I think it's because we know each other's intention always comes from a place of love and care. So even when that person's maybe saying something to you that you're not quite ready to hear, you probably know in the back of your head they're right.
You need those friends to keep you in check, don't you? Because otherwise you can sort of spiral into directions
Yeah.
and
You know, I will
you
take her
shouldn't.
phone off her if she's going to write a Facebook post about friendship.
Oh God, yeah.
When she's pissed.
This was years ago, guys. It's okay, I'm alright now. But
She's
yeah.
had kids since then. She's changed.
Yeah, I'm totally different. And now I'm like, do you know what? You weren't a friend. But it's hard, isn't it? In the moment, it's very difficult. It's like when you're with a boyfriend that
that
is really
treats you rubbish.
yeah, treats you really poorly. You don't see it until you've left
No,
the
and
situation,
sometimes
so.
I always say, like, Jamie was such a realization for me that when I got into a relationship with him, I had no bad blood towards any ex-partners or people I dated. But as soon as I got in a relationship with him and seen how well he treated me, I was a bit like,
bloody hell.
but also you kind of think back, wow, you were bastards. You weren't good people. You weren't very nice. I was given a lot and not getting a lot
You have
back.
no comparison though. It's one of those things that puts it into perspective.
Yeah.
It's the same with friendships.
Exactly that. So when you then eventually find those people, and
Hold
listen,
them
if you're
close.
listening at the moment and you don't have any close friends that are maybe talk to you the way that me and Laura talk to each other, or you're really struggling to find those friendships, please reach out, because
We're always here.
Yeah.
Like our inboxes are always open.
100%. And I just think, like, I do make jokes sometimes, like when I'm saying, oh no, I don't need any more friends. But on a serious note, I am happy to spend time and build connections with anyone, because I just think you can't have too much love and joy and care and like in your like world.
You've always got room for good people in your life.
Yeah,
haven't you?
100%. You've always got room for more people that are going to give you, like, you can give each other positivity back and help each other and have friendships that are more about having a laugh. You know, they're more than that. They're about deeply caring for each other and having a network around you, like a safety net. And that's what I feel we have
And it
in our group.
sometimes as well, I think this is maybe a good place to end is that losing some of these friendships, even though it can be really heartbreaking and almost like soul destroying when it happens, you will get to a point in your life, I certainly have now, where I think, do you know what? That was actually the best situation that could have really happened in some respects.
Both of us, of the friendships that we've spoke about that have sadly come to an end, I don't necessarily feel like I'm missing anything from my life with them gone.
And you spend more time with the people that actually are probably more deserving of your time, because they are the ones that are there. If you're like Shan and I, Shan knows that I've got 2 kids. She knows that it's hard for me sometimes to get time to do things, and she always makes sure that she can accommodate me, and I'll forever be grateful to you for that. So it's just things like that, isn't it?
But yeah, but I think you do that for your friends, right? You have different times in your life. As the girls get older, your circumstances will change, things like that. I've built friends with you before kids, during, like, as they grow up, hopefully until they're old, and then I can be called Auntie Shan. But
you already are.
No.
Sienna already calls you Auntie Shan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it just opens up the opportunity for you to appreciate
to give time to people,
the friendships that actually are gonna give you and that other person the most.
Yeah, and I just think as well, like, there's so much, grief gives you such like an outer perspective of life, that you can look down on things and go, okay, well, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. There's lessons learned, and I'll go from there. But yeah, thanks guys. I hope obviously that episode gave you a bit more into the friendships. If there's anything else you want us to discuss in more details, let us know. And like I say, reach out if you're really struggling at the moment, like to maybe build relationships, and it doesn't come naturally to everyone. Like
it's harder when you're an adult as well.
yeah, sometimes it's hard to
Sometimes.
build relationships. I think me and Laura and I are very lucky that we kind of found each other in work and things like that. Otherwise, we never would have come across each other. And we appreciate obviously that circumstance. And if you're not, maybe you work from home, maybe you've not got friendships from school or whatever it is, make it trying to build a connection and people with people is the best thing you'll do, but it's not easy. So if you want any advice or you want to reach out and try and build, if you want to be friends with me and Laura, there's always space if you're good. And if you're good at editing things like podcasts, that would be fabulous.
Even better. Yeah, if you can bring that to the table.
Shout out to Paula for starting doing our online content, by the way, because that's a massive plus, and that is a great friend.
Thank you, P-Bizzle.
Yeah, cheers, P-Biz. But yeah, love you all loads. Give us a follow and subscribe on social media and Spotify and YouTube and everything else. And we will see you all soon.
Take care. See you soon.